Hey there YouTube. So in this video I wanted to cover IRS Form 8869. This is a form that you filed to elect to treat a subsidiary entity of your group as a Subchapter S sub. Okay, so the form is relatively straightforward, just a few kind of key points to highlight here. First thing we want to do is look at an example of a structure chart where this issue might arise. So over here we have a parent S corporation. This is an LLC. It's a Delaware corp, but it filed an election to be treated as an S corp, right? So it filed at 2553. It got the election approved. And then later on, what they did was they set up a couple of subsidiaries here. They own 100% of them. They have an LLC here, line of business 3, and then another line of business 2. And these are LLCs, so for those of you familiar with these rules, when you have an LLC that's owned by one person or one entity, it's automatically treated as a disregarded entity. So these two entities on the side here, they just, because they're DREs, everything gets reported on the S Corp return up here, and then that's it. But what they did here was they set up another corporation as a wholly owned sub, but it's not an LLC. So this is just a regular Delaware corporation that they formed. And by default, a regular for-profit corporation is treated as a C Corp for federal tax purposes. So every year, when this company had to file its return, Department 1 Inc. was filing its own Form 1120 tax return. So you would file an 1120 here, pay tax, and then the S Corp up here would file an 1120S and consolidate these two sub operations. And then really nothing would be going on down here unless they received a dividend. So if there was a dividend distribution going up, there might be some income inclusion there. So now they decided, well, we've had this for a couple of years as a C Corp. Let's make it an S Corp, and then everything will just be consolidated here. So once this makes an S subsidiary election, it's basically a deemed kind of sale and distribution or liquidation of the assets and the income up to the parent sub. And so going forward, this entity no longer is going to be filing an 1120. You're only going to be filing an 1120S up here, and then that's the end of it. So let's look at a couple of some of the key rules here for the qualified Subchapter S election for the subs. So what is an eligible sub? The entity has to be a domestic corp whose stock is owned 100% by the parent. Okay, that's very, very important. You have to own 100% of the stock. So in this example here, if for some reason the parent only owned, let's say 90%, and then the other 10% of this stock was owned by some other third party up here, you couldn't make this election. You've got to own 100% of the stock. The other important piece here is it has to be a domestic corporation, right? Well, also noted up here, but that is important because you could have situations where you might have a Subchapter S company that owns 100% of a foreign company, let's say a Cayman Islands corporation. You can't make a Subchapter S election for the Cayman Islands Corporation. That won't work. It's got to be domestic corp, and then it can't operate in one of these lines of business. So it can't be a bank or thrift institution, can't be an insurance company, and it can't be a DISC. So as long as you're not within one of those kind of realms, and you have a domestic corporation, then you can make the election. The election has to be filed anytime during the year, but the effective date cannot be more than 12 months after the date the election was filed or 2 months, 15 days prior. So in this example here, I'm just going to highlight the date really quick so we can see it. In this example here on line 11, we want to make the election effective January 1, 2020. So we would have to file this form within 2 months and 15 days of Jan 1, 2020. So if we're doing this in February 2020, we're good to go. Okay, so now let's, so those are the dates and the timelines. Let's look at the form itself and run through some of the parts here. So part 1, fairly straightforward, right? We have to enter the name and identifying information of the parent company. So we have parent S corporation, the EIN, street address, and then a contact details for somebody that's an authorized rep for the company. And then where was the last return filed? E-file is appropriate if you electronically filed. If you paper filed, enter the IRS location where you actually filed that return. And then part 2 here, we have the subsidiary corporation information. So we've got our Department 1 Inc., that's the C Corp, EIN, street address, date of incorporation, state of incorporation. And then here again on line 11, we want it to be effective at the start of the 2020 tax year. Now, it says here, question 12, did the subsidiary previously file a federal income tax return? In our case, yes, right? It was a C corporation for a number of years, so it was filing Form 1120 for several years. So we enter yes, and then enter information down here about the C Corp filing. So we e-filed it, and then here we have the tax return ending date of the last return filed. Okay, so 12/31/2019, the last return we were filing for this company is going to be a 2019 Form 1120, and that's appropriate because remember up here we want it to be elected to be treated as a S Corp sub the very next day, right? So for the full 2020 tax year. Line 14, 15, you can answer no. I mean, unless one of these reorgs applies here. Subsidiary's last return filed as a consolidated return, no, right? It was a standalone 1120. It wasn't being part of a consolidated C Corp return. And then at the bottom here, John Smith here, the CEO, would have to sign it, enter their title, and then date it. And then that's all set. And you print it out, mail it into the IRS, and then you should be all set to go. So now, as far as housekeeping, right, remember the 2019 tax return is going to be a final C Corp return. And then for the 2020 year going forward, this company's operations, all of the assets, liabilities, income and expenses just get reported directly on the 1120S for the parent company as if it was just a disregarded entity, right? So it's still a corporate entity, so it's not a single member LLC, but it's a corporate entity that is a Subchapter S sub. Okay, so that covers it. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment below, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.